Cancelo. Cancelo. Barcelona's right back, left back, former Manchester City, former Bayern Munich. He injured his MCL. And your MCL is a part of your knee that allows the thigh bone and the shin bone to stay together, just like the ACL. But instead of being on the inside of your knee, meaning the deepest part of it, it's on the inner portion of the knee. So let me show you what I mean by that. If you look at the inside of the knee here, let's get a really good picture. Oh, this is a great one. So I really like this picture because it shows us the ACL as well as the MCL. So if you look at, we have 1, 2, 3 kind of diagrams here. Let's look all the way on the left. You'll see right in the middle of that knee, you see that big red piece of tissue. Yeah, that's actually the ACL. And if you look to the right of that, you'll see that piece of tissue in red that's going up and down. That is actually your MCL. And what that does is it prevents your knee from collapsing inward. And if you have a pretty significant injury to the structure, what's going to happen is if you look at the two diagrams to the right of that, those fibers will actually tear, and it's going to allow the knee to move a little bit more than it's supposed to. Now, one of the great things about the MCL is because the MCL is outside of the knee, because again, the ACL is that one all the way on the inside. The MCL is on the outside. It has a really good blood supply. It has a lot of arteries. It has a lot of veins. It has a lot of ways to get really good nutrients to that tissue. And what that allows the MCL to do is heal mostly on its own. Versus the ACL, you have to have a surgical procedure in order to get it fixed. But the MCL, it's going to be an injury for Cancelo that is going to be dependent on how bad that tear actually is and how bad his symptoms actually are. I've actually had an MCL injury myself. It was relatively minor. It was what we call a grade 1, where it took me about 2 to 3 weeks, and I was feeling just as good as before the injury. MCL injuries can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 or 5 months, depending on how bad the tear is. Again, it is really, really good that it has a blood supply. It's able to heal on its own, and it's able to return to its 100% before the athlete goes back. But sometimes it takes a lot of time. And specifically in the game of soccer, there are 2 things that are really important for defendos, and in particular, Cancelo, to be 100% before he goes back. Number 1 is going to be tackling, because when you do a tackle one-on-one versus an attacker, which he will do as a defender, even though he doesn't defend that much, he's still going to have to defend, and he's still going to have to tackle. And if you are a defender and you can't tackle, you frankly cannot do your job effectively. So whenever you're in a tackling situation and you're tackling with the inside of your foot, you're going to put stress on that medial collateral ligament. And that's exactly how this injury happened in the first place, where Cancelo was going full in 100% for a 50-50 ball, went foot to foot with the ball in between, and that stress from the ball traveled directly up his leg into his knee, and that's where the tissue got damaged. So tackling is going to be absolutely essential for Cancelo to be at 100% before he comes back. And what's even more important, considering Cancelo's style of play, long balls. Anytime you play a long ball with the inside of your foot, or anytime you strike the ball with pretty high forces with the inside of your foot, it's going to stress the MCL. That's just the way the biomechanics of soccer happen in relation to the foot, in relation to the knee, and in relation to rotation of the hip. It's just going to happen that way. So those 2 things really need to be checked off before Cancelo comes back. And to be honest, his timeline is going to be pretty much determined by how he feels during those actions. Because if he still has pain during those actions, that means those fibers aren't completely healed, which means that his tissue health is not 100%, which means that if he goes in for another 50-50 or another tackle or a really long ball, he's going to have pain, which might result in tissue damage, which might result in a re-injury. It's unfortunate, but those are the things that, play a role in athletes coming back. And this is exactly why not every athlete is going to have the same injury timelines for the same injury, right? Like, let's say let's say I'm a number 10 where, maybe I'm playing more short passes over a shorter period, or a shorter distance, much, much closer, smaller space. And because I'm a 10, I don't have to do 50-50 tackles necessarily as much as a 6 or an 8 or a center back or a fullback. Well, I'm not going to be in those situations. And maybe if I am, I can pull out a little bit, right? For example, Kevin De Bruyne, if he had a MCL injury and he says, Pep Guardiola, I can do everything except tackle. Well, Pep say, okay, then you play. If you have to tackle, then pull out. That's fine, but you can still play. So it's different for everybody. But if it's, let's say, Ederson, it's like, well, you got to do goal kicks, my guy. So long balls are important. But let's say it's on Ederson's weak foot. Well, that's a little bit different. So you guys can start to see how every injury, it's not necessarily what is the injury and what is the timeline for this injury. It's more of what tissue is damaged. How does this tissue damage relate to how I perform on the field? Which actions can I do? Which actions can I do? And how will that relate to me returning to the field as quickly as possible?